wanted to use
Really sure.
Okay. Let me turn next to Brad Wilcox. Dr. Wilcox, the senator talked much about the importance of good marriages and family for developing the kinds of citizens that democracy needs. As Richard Reeves just said, I think probably everybody would agree with that. But isn't it a mistake to immediately picture the nuclear family of America in the 1950s when we talk about marriage and families? Where most of history, isn't it true that families were much different than they were in post-war America, post-World War II America? I mean, it wasn't always like Leave It to Beaver, and it certainly isn't like Leave It to Beaver now. So shouldn't we recognize that history has changed again, and that we need a different template for what the family should be, a different template for what marriage should be? Can't it include mothers with full-time careers, for example, or well-supported single parents, or fathers more involved in raising kids, kids raised by grandparents? I'm just curious what you think.
The extended family has played an important role in the rearing of the next generation. And I think particularly we've seen in this new economy that the extended family is taking a more central role, again, in helping our kids and young adults, grow up and navigate the tough economic times that we see now in this country. But actually, to kind of just build on that very point, I think what we're seeing is that the challenges, both educationally and economically, facing our kids and our young adults are in some ways even more daunting now than they were in the 50s and 60s in a very different economic context. And it's for that very reason that we actually need to do more to ensure that our kids get the time, the attention, the affection, and the money of two parents who love them very much and are willing to sacrifice for them to make sure that they have those opportunities and seize them. That's the character point that Richard was just making. So I think if anything, in some ways, the fact that we live in a more competitive and more challenging world only sort of increases the need for two supportive parents at the very minimum to be in the picture for kids' lives. And that I think, if anything, we should be more attentive now to the ways in which grandparents in particular, and I think in many contexts, can also play a role in helping kids navigate today's tough times. And just one empirical point on that, and this is sort of touched on by both the president here of Catholic University, John Garvey, and by the senator, and that is that there was a study done by Raj Chetty at Harvard looking at mobility in America, what predicts whether kids from the bottom quartile, the bottom fifth in American society, will over the course of their lives move up to the top fifth. And what he found in that study was that the single most powerful predictor, above and beyond racial segregation, above and beyond income segregation, above and beyond school quality, was the share of single mothers in a particular community. And that kids who are being raised in communities with lots of two-parent families are much more likely to realize the American dream. This is a new study. It's sort of a new social fact, I think, for all of us to think about. And if we really are committed to renewing equal opportunity in America, we have to think about ways in which we can increase the share of kids growing up in intact two-parent families, both for themselves, but also more ecologically in their larger communities.
Richard Reeves kind of gave me an interesting follow-up to that. He wanted to talk about same-sex marriage. I think this might be a good time. Can't same-sex couples provide exactly what you're talking about?
Well, I think that's certainly one of the big questions facing scholars and activists. And I think time will tell about whether or not they can and will do that.
Dr. Moore, Senator Rubio suggested today that the social ills facing us can in large part be traced to a breakdown of the family. I'm curious to what extent you agree with that assessment, and it might be interesting to think about other things in this context, like, like for example, the role of religion in society as well.
Yes, and I think that is an important thing to talk about when we're talking about culture, to remember the important role of religion. One of the things that I think we saw here was Senator Rubio talking about culture, talking about, at least implicitly, about faith, about the roots of culture, without necessarily boiling faith down to a conversation stopper, which is, I think, what typically happens. I'm not a member of the faith-based community. I'm a Christian. There's a difference. I think that we have specificity of belief that is a good thing in this country, and we can have differences and discussions about those differences of belief. And the important thing for us to recognize when we talk about these conflicts over religious issues is to understand that it is not a handicap to be able to discern the motivations, the deep roots of motivations in other people based upon their religious convictions. And so I find, for instance, that when I speak about how my faith motivates me to care for the poor, to care for the immigrants, how my faith motivates me to care for the natural world and for creation. People on the left don't tend to mind that. But as soon as I start talking about how my faith motivates me to care for the unborn, how my faith motivates me to understand that there is a difference between a mother and a father in a family, now suddenly my faith should be ruled out of the conversation altogether because we don't share that. I think that's a mistake. And I think one of the roots of the culture war that we have around us right now in this country is that there is at least a certain segment of American society that doesn't seem to understand religious motivation at all. And I think we saw that to a great degree in, for instance, the Hobby Lobby case and the religious liberty skirmishes that we have going on right now, in which some people seem to assume there must be another real motivation. It can't be that the Little Sisters of the Poor or the Green family really are motivated by the fact that they believe that they will give an account before the judgment seat of Christ. They must really be motivated by economic factors or by factors of political power. I think that impoverishes discourse in this country, and it also impoverishes the culture in this country. I think that we need strong civil society, and part of strong civil society means strong churches. I agree with you that the nuclear family alone, nuclear family is pivotal, and I believe strongly in family stability. Nuclear family alone is not the answer to any of our problems. We need extended families, and I think there are all sorts of factors why that has declined, including mobility. Children don't grow up with cousins and grandparents in the way that they once did. But we also need strong churches in which a child grows up recognizing, I'm part of this family, I'm also part of this larger community, and it is a community that is outward focused toward the rest of the world.
You know, speaking of strong churches, I was struck by something that Penny Nance said in that regard when she argued, and I think very well, that churches have a real responsibility to play a role in all of this. Is part of what we're seeing, Dr. Moore, is part of what we're seeing a failure of the churches in America?
There is no question that part of what we're seeing is a failure of the churches in America. And a great deal of that has to do with the way that we conceive of what the church is. And I think that actually lines up with some of the problems that we see in marriage culture. One of the most controversial things that I ever say, I find, is not anything that I talk about on television. It's when I sit down with a couple who want to be married, and I say to them, I'm not going to allow you to write your own vows. Because the couple assumes that this wedding ceremony is their event, and
Right.
It is about celebrating their love. And I have to say, it is about you, but it's about vows that you are exchanging with one another before these witnesses with an accountability to a larger community, to the church. And so when marriage simply becomes a vehicle for me to live out the sort of romantic notions that I hear on pop radio, that destroys marriage. And when the church simply becomes a collection of individuals seeking their individual spiritualities together in the same room, that erodes the church as well.